Don't get me wrong, I'm all for playing a pretty song on the banjo. One with lots of, nice soft brush strokes, clean drop thumb, all that good fancy stuff. But what happens when you want to make the song a little rougher, throw a little dirt on it? Well, one good way to do that is by adding a few string bends. And so that's what we're going to talk about today is how do you add string bends to songs? So we're going to go over the technique. We're going to go over where you might use them. I'll show you some practice exercises and stay to the end because I'm going to show you how to use string bends to simplify difficult parts in banjo songs in a way that still sounds great. So if you're a beginner, you definitely don't want to miss that. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to show you an example of what I'm talking about here. And we're going to take Cripple Creek, just a classic standard song. It's probably one of the first songs you ever learned. It's definitely the first song I learned. And it goes something like this. Now what happens when we add a string bend to it? You see how we keep that, we've replaced that slide with the bend? It still has that upward trajectory feeling, but we've replaced it with a bend, and I think that makes it just adds a little more flavor to the song. Okay, so let's get into it. Let's see how to bend your strings. First, do me a favor, hit like and subscribe. Helps me grow the channel. And yeah, it's super helpful, helps me make more content like this. So if this is useful for you, yeah, go ahead and hit those buttons real quick. All right, thanks. On with the show. So let's look at the technique. The first thing we're going to look at is sort of how to place your fingers. So we'll start on the third string here at the third fret. And you're just going to, I want to mention, I find the third and fourth strings a little easier to bend. It tends to give it that dirty sound a little better than the first and second strings, but we will go over those strings as well. We're going to start at the third fret of the third string, and you're just going to fret that with your ring finger. And then what I want you to do is put your middle finger and your index finger down as well. Don't worry about, you don't have to fit them all in the third fret, you're just using them to support the ring finger. So you've got those all down on the strings. And now what I want you to do is just play the note and tilt your wrist. So here's the important part. Bending strings is not a pulling motion. You don't want to pull away from the fretboard. You don't want to pull your hand down. That's going to give you a lot less control, and it's going to make it harder to get back on track when you return. So we bend the wrist instead. And it's almost coming from like the forearm elbow area. So my fingers don't move. I'm not shortening the distance between my fingers and my palm. It's a gentle twist of the wrist. I'm kind of using my thumb as a fulcrum. So practice that. Don't worry about the pitch that you're bending to. Just worry about keeping the note going so you're not cutting off or anything like that. You're just getting a nice clean note the whole way through. Once you feel comfortable with that, you can get that nice clean note there. You want to practice returning while keeping the note going. So returning to the string to the original position. So that would be something like this. And remember, all you're doing is just a gentle twist of your arm and wrist. And you're using these other two fingers as support. Now, one thing I want to mention here is that when you're doing this on the upper strings, the first and second strings, you are going to twist in the opposite direction. So here you're going to push up. But it's still that same twisting motion. It's just in the opposite direction. And that's just because we don't want to fall off the fretboard here. That won't work. So once you feel like you have that motion working for you reasonably well, what I want you to do now is work on the pitch. So there's a really simple exercise that will help you reach the right pitch when you're bending. Now remember, this doesn't have to be exact. Like I said, we're making the song a little dirtier, right? However, The closer you can get to the pitch you're bending to, the better it's going to sound. We're going to practice bending to the half note. You can definitely practice bending a full step as well. So the way I do that is I hit that 3rd fret, go up and hit the 4th fret. And the goal here is I'm kind of trying to get that note in my head. Then I go back and do the bend. And I'm going to try to bend to that note. So. And once I have it bent, I'm just going to hold it there and just play it a few times. Let it go. And hit the 4th fret. So you see those are pretty close to the same note. And you just want to keep practicing that. And you'll hear it, like if you're wrong, you know. See, I didn't bend far enough there. And basically you just want to keep practicing that, various positions, various strings, until you can pretty reliably bend a half step just from muscle memory. The next piece, so sort of the next practice exercise and the next piece of string bending is just doing it in rhythm. So you're not going to use string bends very often in like extremely fast songs because you're just not going to hear it too well. They generally will go into slower, like medium tempo pieces. So, you know, if you can get these at 80 to 100 beats a minute, you're probably in good shape. The best way to do that is just to work on incorporating it into your bum ditty basic claw hammer stroke with a metronome. So something like this. Work on doing that with the brushstroke, without the brushstroke. If you want, in the description, I linked a PDF of some practice exercises that you can play along with the metronome. Will help you get your timing down. The tab's nice because you don't have to sort of keep that piece of it in your head. You can just sort of read along with it and just really concentrate on the technique. So I like doing practice exercises with tab. You might too. If you do, link in the description. So now let's talk about where you might use a string bend in a song. I like to use it on sort of fretted quarter notes on the 3rd and 4th strings, or where there's a slide or something like that, and just going from one note to another. And typically, a lot of times it's going to be towards the end of a phrase as sort of a cap on it. So let's take a look at one place where I really like to use them. You're going to see this little, you know, you're going to see that little cap in tons of songs. So you're just doing the little drop thumb between the open first and second, hitting the 2nd fret of the 3rd string, and then open. So that is a prime spot for a really nice sounding string bend where I hit that quarter note on the 3rd string at the 2nd fret. So now I go from this to this. Yeah, it just gives it that little bit of flavor. Sounds really nice in tons of songs. So look for opportunities like that where you're just sort of holding on a fretted note on the 3rd and 4th string and see what it sounds like when you add a bend to it. And finally, I mentioned for beginners, or hey, not for beginners, I still use this all the time, a way to simplify difficult to play passages in songs with string bends. Typically, this is going to be a slide or a hammer-on that you're not feeling too comfortable with the accuracy on. And you do obviously want to get your accuracy up, but we also want to play songs that sound good fast, right? So you can replace some of these with string bends while you get more comfortable with the actual piece. So as an example, really typical example, and I did it on Cripple Creek, a slide from 2 to 4 on the 3rd string. So if I'm not feeling comfortable with sort of the accuracy of my slide yet, if I'm overshooting it or undershooting it very often, like, yeah, I do want to continue to work on that and get that right. But in the meantime, if I want to play something that sounds good, I can just replace it with a string bend. See what I mean? So anytime you're going from one fretted note to another, if you are having trouble with that, I should say within, a fret or two of each other, maybe up to like 2 or 3 frets max. But anytime you're having trouble making a transition like that, you can experiment with replacing it with a string bend, and that will probably make it easier to play, and it will probably still sound good. All right, so that is going to do it for this one. I'll see you next time.